Hello, everybody. This is Sinema77, horror and cult film lover. I'm back with another video. Today is going to be a little something different. This isn't going to be so much of a movie review. What this actually was I was gearing up. I was trying to get everything ready because I was planning on doing a movie review of Poison Ivy from the 90s with Drew Barrymore and Sarah Gilbert. And upon doing that, I started remembering, back in the 90s. I know like a lot of movie aficionados and stuff like that, they remember a lot of like the porn films from the 70s and stuff, especially now, because Vinegar Syndrome is releasing all these, like classic erotic porno movies on Blu-ray and stuff like that. But I'm just wondering if like people remember that back in the 90s, there was like a wave, just a big wave of erotic thrillers that kind of became a big thing. And I'm just wondering, if people really remember that. It's like me, I definitely remember it because in the 90s as a teenage boy, this is before the internet, where you can look up anything you want or being like, just, 15, 16 years old, you have no access to, the internet, you have no access to pornography or any of that kind of stuff. So, you try to make do with what you can. And but we did have cable, and we did have like a Showtime and Cinemax, and so so it's like, well, you can't get hardcore or anything like that. So pretty much Friday, Saturday nights, Skinemax was the next best thing. And I wonder if a lot of people remember, but um, there was a big wave of erotic films and erotic thrillers that were made in the 90s. And even more surprising was the fact that there was a lot of name actors and actresses who ended up being in these movies. And we're not going to talk about, I'm not going to really review them or anything like that, just going to talk about some of these that I remember from the day. And I got my tablet here, so just a second. But yeah, I mean, you had like a lot of name actors and actresses that did these kind of movies. Like, for example, believe it or not, Lou Diamond Phillips, he did one that not only did he star in, but he co-wrote and directed the movie. That one was called Dangerous Touch. It's him and Kate Vernon. And like I said, not only did he, star in the movie, he co-wrote it, directed it. And I had seen the movie. A lot of these movies that we're going to be talking about is they're almost impossible to find because they were just pretty much released on VHS, and now you can't really find these movies. But and the story is Lou Diamond Phillips, is kind of a con man, and Kate Vernon is a radio sex therapist, and he starts seducing her, and it turns out he's a bad guy. He's into the mob for money and this and that, and so he's kind of like trying to play games with everybody, and gets her involved in it and everything else. But it's kind of weird because I mean, we think of Lou Diamond Phillips, we think of like La Bamba and Young Guns and stuff like that, all the stuff he did back then. But yeah, it's hard to believe he ever did a movie like that. But yeah, pretty risque, pretty sexy flick. It's the only downside though. Like I said, a lot of these movies are really going to be hard to talk about because a lot of them are just they're pretty much in the VHS era. A lot of them are gone. You can't find them. Now this one here, real quick. This one I had talked about when I did my review for the Brian De Palma film Body Double, which was basically kind of Brian De Palma's version of Rear Window, the Hitchcock film. This here, I had mentioned this, but this movie here, I'm Watching You. This is basically, as you can see, this was put out by. Whoop, I think I hit the volume button or something. Anyway, you can see this was put out by Playboy, and this movie was very erotic and very sexy. Um, I would say more so than Body Double, but that's not saying the Body Double's not a good movie. It truly is, but yeah, that one was pretty much done with Playboy models and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody even remembers the TV show. You might. I didn't even think. Oh, God, I wish I thought to look that up. You might even look on YouTube, the TV show back in the 90s, if everybody remembers A Current Affair. They even did a segment on these erotic thrillers, and some people are talking about like, no, they're not very erotic, they're not really thrilling or anything. It's all a matter of taste. So And like, okay, now we're going to talk about this one. This one here, I think is kind of interesting because of the actors in the movie. But I did see this movie back in my teenage years, and you know, a lot of nudity, a lot of erotica and everything else. And the movie is called Wild Cactus. This movie was pretty explicit. The movie actually stars David Naughton, who everybody remembers from American Werewolf in London, but also too, Robert Starr, Maniac Cop himself. He was in this movie. Paul Gleason, Dwayne T. Robinson from Die Hard. It's like he was in this movie too, and they play this. It was I believe it was David Naughton and Indy Allen. They play this married couple. They're in the desert and they run afoul of this couple they believe is a couple, but actually they're crooks and everything else. And they try to kill David Naughton. They take him out of the desert, leave him for dead, and he has to try to get back to his home. And meanwhile, pretty much both this guy and this girl, they're like going after his wife or girlfriend like there's no tomorrow, and plenty of nudity, plenty of soft core and everything else. And but I mean, like I said, it was weird to see Mr. Vernon from Breakfast Club, and like I said, David from American Werewolf in London being in a movie like this, and David Naughton doing these, erotic sex scenes and stuff like that. And a lot of these movies they had a lot of name actors. Like I said, here's like another one we'll talk about. Okay, this one is called Mirror Images, and this one was pretty sexy. This one, has Delia Shepard and Jeff Conway. Everybody, Jeff Conway, rest in peace. But everybody always remembered Jeff Conway as Kaniki from Grease. Delia Shepard, I don't know if too many people remember. She was in one of the witchcraft movies, but kind of like the one thing mainstream audiences would remember her for is in the movie Rocky Five. She ended up being Tommy Gunn's kind of trophy girlfriend. She's the one who's like kind of nagging at Tommy, when he goes to Rocky's house, and she's all Tommy, open the door for me and all that stuff, at the car and everything. But she was known for that. But she's been in a lot of these movies too, and so but yeah, it's like okay, here's like another one we're going to talk about is Adrian Zemed, who a lot of people would remember. If you knew movies and stuff back in the '80s, you knew who he was. I think he at one point he was like the new. They did like a version of Soul Train where he was the host on it, and but everybody from the '80s and stuff would remember him. He was Tom Hanks' best friend in the movie Bachelor Party, and he was in the movie Grease too. He played Johnny, the guy, the leader of the T-Birds. But he did this movie here in the '90s called The Other Woman, which was yeah pretty naughty, kind of a naughty little flick there. And but I do remember that very beautiful women in the movie and sexy actresses in that movie. He plays kind of like he's married to this woman who's kind of like I think she's like an advertising executive or something like that, or lawyer or something. I don't remember. But she's kind of having problems in the bedroom and stuff like that, and so he goes away on a trip, and then she kind of starts going through this kind of sexual discovery, sexual awakening, and things like that, and ultimately, goes through this kind of thriller scenario and stuff, and tries to make her love life better and everything else. And and now we're going to talk about one actress who has actually did a number of these movies back in the '90s, and we're going to talk about Tanya Roberts. Here's one movie that she was in called Sins of Desire. And thinking about, we talked about Delia Shepard just a minute ago. She's in this movie too. She's the blonde sitting on the bench there. But yeah, Sins of Desire, starring Tanya Roberts and Nick Cassavetes. Funny enough, Nick Cassavetes, son of John Cassavetes, who went on to direct The Notebook and other big hit movies. But in this movie, they both get down and dirty. And Tanya Roberts, everybody remembered her from the '80s, and then nowadays, I think most people just remember her from that '70s show. But yeah, she shows pretty much everything in this movie, and it's like a lot of sex scenes, a lot of nude scenes, and everything else. And so If you wanted to see Tanya Roberts nude, this was one of the movies to do it with. There's another one here too that we're going to talk about in that movie. One of the more popular series of erotic movies in the '90s, and that was Night Eyes. The movie was now the Night Eyes series that was starring and created by Andrew Stevens. Now, nowadays a lot of people would never know who Andrew Stevens was, but I mean, some people might. Andrew Stevens was a name actor back in the '80s and I think in the late '70s and stuff, and he did more like legitimate type movies. He was in Brian De Palma's movie The Fury. He was in he was in the Charles Bronson movie 10 to Midnight. Um, he did a TV series. I think it was like based in the Revolutionary War called The Bastard. He was a name actor, and he did a lot of kind of like legitimate parts and stuff like that. But as it got into the '90s and stuff, he kind of started getting away from these legitimate roles, started doing more um, soft core films. And not only that, not only he started acting in them, he started writing and directing a lot of them. And so he made like altogether there were like four movies in the Night Eyes series, and he directed and acted in other ones as well. There was a series of movies called Body Chemistry, which is basically about it, kind of like a Basic Instinct kind of a story about this female doctor who kills her patients and stuff like that. She has sex with them, kills them, kind of almost like Sharon Stone's character in Basic Instinct. But these movies were very heavily eroticized and stuff like that. Andrew Stevens was in number three, I think. Funny enough, but back in the late '70s or early '80s, Stevens did a legitimate movie, a legitimate thriller starring with Morgan Fairchild called The Seduction, and that was one movie he was very much known for, where he was like a photographer, but he was a stalker, and Morgan Fairchild was she was a TV weather girl and everything, and he was obsessed with her, but she had a boyfriend. She wanted nothing to do with him, but he was just infatuated with her, and he couldn't get over her and everything else. And so he would start as the movie progressed, he got crazier and crazier, and he got to the point, he anybody that would get in the way, he would end up killing them. So nobody could stop him from getting to her and stuff like that. But anyway, going back to the Night Eyes series, there was four of them altogether, and then uh, one actress that he ended up working with, doing several movies with, was Shannon Tweed. We'll get to her in just a second, but yeah, he did Night Eyes 2 and 3 with her, and then they did a fourth one where he was basically passing the torch to another actor, and that movie was pretty controversial at the time it came out. I remember because the female lead of the movie was Paula Barbieri, and anybody who remembers Paula Barbieri at the time of the O.J. Simpson trial, the murder of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman, Paula Barbieri was O.J.'s girlfriend at the time. And it was another case of like people did not want to support this movie. They didn't want to support her because they're as far as they were concerned, she was just another one of these terrible people who was just trying to make a name for herself based off the murder of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman. So kind of like people just kind of they did not want her to succeed in a career or anything like that. Pretty much anybody who's they felt was like trying to profit off of the Simpson murder case. They didn't want anybody to, and so she was one of them. So that kind of killed the series right then and there. But so yeah, and that movie just wasn't all that great either. But the first three were pretty decent movies. They had good. They weren't gems or anything like that, but they were fun to watch, and you got to see some nudity and stuff like that. But yeah, in Night Eyes 2 and 3, it was Shannon Tweed. Now, speaking of Shannon Tweed, like I said, we're going to get to her now. Shannon Tweed was basically, okay, this movie, Sexual Response, I remember this movie well. Now, the thing is like everybody knows Shannon Tweed basically is Mrs. Gene Simmons. She's the wife of Gene Simmons. She's been the wife of him for many years. Shannon Tweed, back in the day, she was a very well known Playboy model. She posed for Playboy a lot. And back in the '90s, she did bunches of these movies. I mean, seriously, she almost had like a new one out every week. And, she just did so many of these flicks. And And oh my god, like I said, yeah, I mean, it just did. It seemed like she had a new one coming out every week, and so Shannon Tweed basically kind of became like, I guess maybe you could say like the Jenna Jameson or maybe like the Sasha Grey of 90s erotic flicks. I mean, mainly because she was the one who was always cast in the most of them. And just like I said, every time you turn around, it seemed like she was always in one of these movies. So, and then, and this will probably be the last one we talk about. Like I said, there are more we could talk about. I just wanted to give some examples, and just kind of wonder if like if people if remember any of these movies, and so like this last one here is called Carnal Crimes. This movie is very, lots of nudity, lots of sex and stuff like that. But the movie stars Martin Hewitt. Now I don't know, a lot of people would not really know who he was, but Martin Hewitt was he was an actor, mainstream actor in the in the 80s and stuff. He played the son in the movie Yellowbeard. Yellowbeard was a comedy with, had like the cast of Monty Python, cast of like Mel Brooks movies like Peter Boyle and Madeline Kahn and Marty Feldman. Cheech and Chong were in this movie and everything else. And he was one of the Stacey Nelkin, who everybody remembers from like Halloween 3 and, all these other movies. He was in that movie. He was in the movie, I think it was Endless Love, I think, with Brooke Shields, so he had a pretty mainstream career, and then he went on to do, a lot of these erotic films and stuff too, and he did one that was very explicit called Night Rhythms. I remember that one because it was him, and you had Tracy Tweed, who was the sister of Shannon Tweed. She did a number of erotic films and stuff back in the day too. Delia Shepard was in that movie as well. If I remember, I think even David Carradine shows up in the movie, does a cameo appearance in that. So like I said, that was the thing. Back in the '90s, you saw a lot of name actors in these movies. It's like you would always see somebody you would end up recognizing. So like I said, we just went through like Lou Diamond Phillips was in one. Not only did he act in it, he co-wrote and directed it. Andrew Stevens, Tanya Roberts, what was it? Tanya Roberts. I think she was in one of the was it Conan movies, or she was in Red Sonja. She was in one of those movies. Back in the '80s, she was well known for stuff like that. But like I said, nowadays everybody pretty much just knows her as from that '70s show. But yeah, I mean you have a lot of name actors in these movies. So anyway, that's gonna pretty much wrap it up. I think we talked long enough. I just wanted to make a video talking about. It's like, yeah, that was kind of a big thing back in the '90s. I don't know too many people that remember that. If you do, if you want to comment, that's up to you. But yeah, I do remember the '90s erotic thrillers. And that was kind of like a big thing, and it started to die out. And I don't know if you'd have anything like that going on today. I know that there are late night movies on Showtime, or I think Skinamax still does stuff, but nowadays these are kind of like movies that are just basically kind of just here's this movie, you take a bunch of amateur professional porn stars and it's just kind of one sequential softcore scene after another, so but these movies were more meant to be like, thrillers, and yeah, they were erotic, they were sexy, a lot of nudity, a lot of sex and stuff, but at the same time, they were supposed to have like plots, and supposed to be real thriller type movies and stuff like that. But yeah, I just wonder if anybody even remembers that time. I do, because like I said, it's just my teen years. It's like that was, if I wanted to see a beautiful naked woman, that's kind of like what I had. Like I said, I had, nowadays, with the internet and stuff like that. I mean, it's like that's nothing. But back then, it's kind of like, well, you know, you had no internet, you had no access to pornography or any of that kind of stuff. It's all like late night, Friday night, Saturday night, late night movies on Skinamax. That was how you were gonna, get to see beautiful naked women. So, but anyway, that's gonna that's gonna end it. Sorry, my throat's really dry. I thank you for watching this video. If you did, I appreciate you for watching it. I hope you liked the video. If you like, please like and subscribe. And this is going to do it. I'm Sinema77, horror cult film lover, and we're we definitely got more stuff, erotic films and everything to chat about. So I'll talk to you later. Have a good evening. Bye bye.